Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
You remember last week, folks, after the Brussels terror attack, I spent significant time here on the EIB network explaining to you just what it was about Brussels being attacked that so shocked, frightened, scared the left. That Brussels, Belgium represents the potential utopia in Europe. Little did I know how right I was. You know, my instincts are always right on the money, but on this one, man, there's even much more, and I can't wait to get into it, because what it is yet another lesson in a never-ending series of lessons on liberalism and the destructive nature it is. Greetings. Great to have you. Rush Limbaugh here behind the golden EIB microphone. The telephone number is 800-282-2882. And the email address, ilrushbaugh@eibnet.com. Hope you had a great Easter. I hope you had a great weekend. I had some time to recharge. Voice is a little bit better today, so we're rocking and rolling and ready to go. The New York Times, in a piece that ran, I guess it's today, "Who will become a terrorist? Research yields few clues." You believe this? The New York Times has been looking into who it is that becomes terrorists, and there's no way to know. There's no way to tell. It's impossible to ascertain in advance who is going to become a terrorist. Right here it is in the New York Times. The brothers who carried out suicide bombings in Brussels last week had long, violent criminal records and had been regarded internationally as potent and potential terrorists. But in San Bernardino last year, one of the attackers was a county health inspector who lived a life of apparent suburban normality. And there are dozens of other young American men and women who've been arrested over the past year for trying to help the Islamic State. Their backgrounds are so diverse that they defy a single profile. Really? They defy a single profile. They defy a single profile. They didn't have one thing in common. The San Bernardino two, the Brussels, Belgium brothers, the ISIS infiltrators, Americans that joined, not one thing in common. Not one. And even if there were, the New York Times wouldn't sit by and let them be profiled anyway. I have never seen such a scapegoat story. I have never seen, and this is such a brazen attempt to deflect focus and attention away from the obvious. I mean, it's serious. It's laughable at the same time, but it really makes you question the motivation here of the New York Times. And then here's an interesting website that we came across called thereligionofpeace.com. You know what this site does? This site lists acts of terror and the number of people dead and wounded in list format, much like the drive-bys report casualties in warfare, much like the drive-bys report the death count in any other criminal endeavor, but they never do it for terrorism. You get newspaper stories, website publishes stories with the details contained within paragraphs, but you never see the death toll. You never see the names, the counts, and the incidents, and they've done it here. List of Islamic terror in the last 30 days. Would you like the numbers? Just to give you an idea. This is part of the list of the Islamic terror attacks that the religionofpeace.com website maintains. During this time period, the past 30 days, there were 147 Islamic attacks in 25 countries in which 1,165 people were killed and 3,221 injured. Now, how many of you thought that the only terror attack that took place in the last 30 days was Brussels? Or maybe you heard about one in Jakarta. But no way do you think that there have been 147 of them. And no way do you think they've happened in 25 different countries. And no way do you think that 1,165 people have been killed, 3,221 injured. And We'll link to it at rushlimbaugh.com, the religionofpeace.com/attacks/attacks.aspx. But it's, our guys there find it without me sending them a link. And some of the countries, Pakistan, Nigeria, Yemen, Iraq, Scotland, Syria, Iraq, Bangladesh, Belgium, and it goes on. Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, Middle Eastern countries for certain, Philippines, Thailand, Syria, Canada, Egypt. It's an astounding list. And when you juxtapose this with the New York Times piece, who will become a terrorist? Research yields few clues. I mean, it's stunning. Okay, on to some other matter. Before we get back to the Brussels piece, Amir Tahari had just a brilliant column in the New York Post yesterday that need to impart some of the highlights from it, some of the excerpts from it, because it's, again, what do we do here every day? I mean, in addition to being America's anchorman, I simply report the news, all of it, and give you, aspects of it and angles that you don't get in the drive-by media, or maybe in any other place. We don't do topics here. We don't do causes. We don't do guests. We just do the news of the day related to how I can use it to inform people what I believe and what I believe to be right. And I believe it liberalism and all of its offshoots. Communism, socialism, you name it. Fascism. Yes, fascism is on the left when it's in the circle. It's not a straight line, of course. All of these things are the most destructive forces. Under the banner of liberalism, you could put under the banner of socialism or communism if you wanted. I prefer liberalism. Got to be careful though, because I don't want to keep people. Oh, here goes Limbaugh, get on liberalism and get bored. I hope that doesn't happen because it's too crucial. I'll give you an example. Little bit of it. There's a story today. Somebody it's the American Spectator somewhere. If not that, I'll get it here in just a second. Obamacare's been up and running 6 years. A guy has recorded every lie about it Barack Obama has told. From you get to keep your job and doctor and policy if you like it, premiums down $2,500, deductibles that get lower, how much people are saving now, how many people have signed up. Every lie that has been told for 6 years. That hasn't been dealt with. And it made me realize something. You've got in the Republican campaign here, both Trump and Cruz, and maybe Kasich. Well, you want to talk about grab audio soundbite. Friday, I'm sorry to prepare you for this one, but I just thought of this. If I can find it real quick. Kasich. Where did I put Kasich? Yeah, grab soundbite number 13. He has nothing to do with what I'm going to say here in a moment. It's just when I said his name, it reminded me that, well, he's just delusional. But the thing is, I don't know if it's practiced, purposeful delusion or if it's actual, real delusion. As a Meet the Depressed yesterday, Chuck Todd, interviewing Kasich, he said, Ted Cruz's campaigns repeatedly called for you to get out, saying a vote for you is a vote for Trump. If you thought your position in this race strengthened Trump, would you get out?
Chuck, I'm beating Hillary by 11 points. I'm the only one that can win in the fall. And as you notice, the narrative over the last week has been, what is wrong with the party? Kasich's the guy that can win the general. Some people have said Kasich would be the best president. I mean, get out for what? If I'd have gotten out, Trump would be the nominee. He would have won Ohio. And frankly, we'll win some districts in Wisconsin. We will move to Pennsylvania, where I'm basically in a statistical tie with Trump. And when we go to New York and everywhere else, we're going to pick up delegates. It's absurd. It's absurd. You know, if you really want, let them consolidate behind me, because frankly, I'm the one that can win in the fall, and I'm the one that can get the crossover votes.
There's a guy that's won one primary, his home state of Ohio, talking about how those two guys ought to get out and coalesce behind him. He's the only guy that can win in the fall. Now, is this just politics? Is this just somebody trying to sound positive because that's what you do? Or is this more serious than that? Because one thing Kasich is doing is harming Cruz. I mean, if you want to say he's harming Trump, fine, but remember the Cruz theory. And by the way, speaking of the Cruz theory, Wisconsin. Who knew? Who ever thought in this entire primary process that Wisconsin would be where we learn pretty much everything? Wisconsin is on April 5th. That's 1 week from tomorrow. The Cruz theory has always been in a head-to-head race with Trump, he will trounce Trump. Because throughout the primary, Trump has gotten, take your pick, 30, 35, 37% of the vote. And all of the other people who are not Trump add up to 65 to 70%. The Cruz theory has been that 65 to 70%, a good portion of it, will coalesce behind him. And therefore, in a two-way race, he will trounce Trump. Well, that's going to be, besides Kasich, Kasich makes this not totally pure because Kasich's going to get some votes. But in Wisconsin, we're going to find out if that theory actually can hold up. And the polling data right now, Cruz and Trump are separated by a point. I think it's Trump 36, Cruz 35 in the polling. And in L.A., I say L.A., California is getting close. Nobody saw this. What's the number in California? Got to read a paragraph here to get the number. L.A. Times poll, September. Nope. Now, Trump 37, up from 24. Cruz is at 30, and Kasich is at 12. Trump had a much bigger lead in California, the point is, than he does now. Cruz is gaining ground there, and its margin of error time in Wisconsin, according to the latest polling data. So Wisconsin is going to be, if even with Kasich in the race, if Cruz can beat Trump there, then there will be something to his theory of a two-man race, and Cruz will triumph because of the anti-Trump vote being so statistically, supposedly polling data-wise, large in the GOP primaries. Now, what I was going to say before the Kasich soundbite, this guy's written his piece on Obamacare, chronicling every lie that Obama has told. And I think it's the kind of stuff that needs to be in this campaign. What do we hear in this campaign about Obamacare? From both candidates. Again, I don't know what Kasich is saying about it. That's it. It's exactly right. Cruz says on day one, I will repeal Obamacare. And Trump says that he'll get around to it at some point, too. And then that's it. And everybody goes, yay! I don't know how many people, it's 6 years old, Obamacare is now. And with every passing month, the tentacles of this intricately woven web of deceit called Obamacare become more deeply embedded in the fabric of our society as an entitlement, as something a lot of people think is a freebie. And it's great to say I'm going to repeal Obamacare, but that just signals it to people who already know what Obamacare is. I know Republican primary, most Republican voters already get it. But I think, remember, the ultimate opponent in this race is going to be whoever the Democrats throw up. Whoever the Democrats nominate, we're going to throw up after the Democrats nominate somebody. And whoever is their nominee, they are going to be the ultimate enemy, the ultimate political enemy, the opponent here. And therefore, explaining why we're going to repeal Obamacare, candidates might think, I don't have time to waste on that. There are too many other issues that I've got to detail, I've got to explain myself on. Look at the riches that Obamacare offers to any candidate as a way of defining himself and defining what he believes, a way of explaining the horrors of liberalism by explaining why I'm going to repeal Obamacare. And go into some of these, and, do not spare any information on how many lies have been told about it in order to get it passed, how many lies are being told now to make it look much better than it is. Yeah, you're going to repeal it. A lot of people brought to the campaign that were not involved months ago who hear you say, I'm going to repeal Obamacare. They may not know why. They may think it's okay to repeal it. They may not. There's some Democrats being brought into the Republican primary by Trump. Who knows what they think about Obamacare? But my point is, it couldn't hurt to explain why you're going to repeal it, because when you get into that, you are defining what we're running against. And it's the essence of it. You're defining what has gone wrong in this country, what has gone and continues to, and that is liberalism. And that takes me back to the Amir Tahari piece in the New York Post yesterday. That liberalism, multiculturalism is what led to Brussels. And even now, there are people in Brussels and people in the European Union trying to blame it on right-wing xenophobia. In other words, people in Brussels and Europe are trying to blame people like you and me, folks. You know why? Because we're so racist and bigoted against militant Islamists that we are so xenophobic, we're making them mad, and we are hurting their feelings, and this is how they're lashing out. That's not why Brussels happened. Brussels happened because Europe gave up its sovereignty. Europe stopped controlling its borders. Europe let in all manner of immigrants, but never required any of them assimilate. Belgium is a classic illustration and example. Belgium was a country that was established out of three different peoples, three different languages, as a buffer between Germany and France. It never did really have a cultural identity. Well, it did. That's the point. It did have the basics of one, and it's vanished now, as immigrants are not required in any of these European countries. Denmark changing in this score, by the way, to assimilate and become a member of the culture of the country that you're immigrating to. Got to take a break. Hang on.
For your convenience, broadcasting almost 100% in English with just a little Spanish lingo. Rush on the EIB network.
Say, folks, I heard it is California that Trump's 36, Cruz 35. Wisconsin has Trump 32, Cruz 30. Both margin of error. Both Trump has lost significant ground in both places in recent weeks. But the California number is what it's an LA Times poll. Maybe it's a field poll in the LA Times, but everybody's shocked by it. Because Trump had such a double-digit lead. Well, he's had double-digit leads most everywhere. Wisconsin, however, the place to next focus. And quickly to the, Hillary? Oh, yeah. You know, the FBI is going to talk to Hillary now, we're told. Remember what happened to Martha Stewart? She got sent to prison for lying to the FBI, not for anything else that she did. Melinda Henneberger, who used to be at Time Magazine, is now where? She's editor-in-chief at Roll Call. She was on America's Election Headquarters on the Fox News Channel, Eric Shawn interviewing her. And here's her reason. Here's her explanation for why I support Trump.
I have wondered if part of the reason isn't that a lot of the very popular national talk radio people like Rush Limbaugh live in Florida, have places in Florida, just as Trump does. That's just a theory. I don't know that to be the case. But in Wisconsin, they have really lashed out at Trump as
what
not
in the world? That's it. Friday. Zip it. Zip it. What in the world? So, first place, I haven't announced support for Trump or anybody. But even if I had, because I have a house here, like Trump does, that's the editor-in-chief at Roll Call? Are you kidding? Meeting and surpassing all audience expectations every day. Rush Limbaugh, your guiding light and America's real anchorman. Here at 800-282-2882. I want to get into this Amir Tahari column that ran New York Post yesterday. Headline, Brussels is what happens when liberals do not push immigrants to integrate. But that headline doesn't even cover the main thrust of this piece. Now, I'm going to do something very rare. I'm going to tell you what this column says before reading the excerpts. I'm going to give you just a bit of analysis, because it's a long piece. It prints out, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. It prints out to over 9 pages. It's a very, very in-depth piece. It is a brilliant column. Mr. Tahari even gets the fundamental problem. It's not just that you cannot have peace if you import and immigrate a bunch of assimilation-resistant, ideologically driven people. It's not enough. You can't, in other words, if that's all you do, you still have a fighting chance to save your country. If you're going to openly allow to immigrate people to your country who are not going to assimilate, and we've been doing that. We have not been requiring assimilation. That's a stark difference between the immigration of today and the immigration prior to 1986. Immigration prior to 1986, all the way up to the late 1800s and in 1965, assimilation was why they came. They wanted to become Americans. They wanted to be part of what was a distinct and unique American culture that contained elements of the American dream, which didn't exist anywhere else in the world. Yes, they might have lived together, formed basic neighborhoods, the Italian, the Irish, and they kept their identities, but they became Americans, proudly so. They learned English, for example. They did everything they could to let everybody know they were Americans. And that hasn't been happening since 1986. The immigration sense, we've been doing the opposite of assimilation. We've been allowing immigrants to maintain their natural language and printing signs and everything in public in 3 or 4 different, however many languages is necessary. We have not forced immigrants to learn English, and without that, there is no way they can become part of the American culture. But the second half of this is the left, the Democrat Party, however you want to characterize it, their war, the war that they are conducting on the values and principles that have defined America, is erasing the culture anyway. It's a two-pronged problem. And this is fundamental to understand what happened to Brussels. You know, the 19 hijackers, many of them headquartered in Brussels, some in Hamburg. Brussels has long been a terrorist safe haven. This column goes on to explain why. But the point here is that liberalism, and by Obama's own admission, his objective is to fundamentally transform America. That means erase the institutions, traditions that have defined our greatness, the culture. Erase it and replace it. And we're in the process of doing it now. You see what's happening in North Carolina and Georgia just recently. Transgender bathrooms and the NFL, so forth, threatens these states economically. That if you pass legislation that requires men to use the men's room and women to use the women's room, we're not going to bring the Super Bowl. I mean, there is an all-out war on the American culture, and it's been going on for a long time, and it's brought to you by the Democrat Party. It's brought to you by the left. So when you combine immigration that is not required to assimilate because you're in the process of destroying the culture anyway, well, hello, that's exactly what happened to Brussels and is what is happening in the United States. The left's war on our principles and values is erasing the culture this country was founded with. It's erasing the culture you would want immigrants to assimilate into. It's being done purposefully. Belgium should not even exist. Belgium has never been a real country, which I will explain in a moment. It was created in the post-war era as a buffer between Germany and France. But because it was not a real country, meaning there were not native inhabitants of a singular nationality and culture, it easily became a European version of what they have in the Middle East, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, an ungoverned territory. It has no real sovereign to speak of, no dominant home culture. It's you wouldn't be very wrong if you said it was stateless. Afghanistan is stateless. This is why Al-Qaeda wanted to go in there. When there's no state, when there's no official sovereign regime, it's easy to go in and establish your own. So they create a Potemkin country of Belgium, not really supposed to be a nation. It was a buffer zone between Germany and France, but even worse, they attacked the idea of nationhood itself when they established it, convinced that Hitler rose because there was too much German patriotism for Germany. Even so, I mean, you know that story. It's like saying we should never have access to fire, because despite that there are millions of life-saving, life-creating, life-generating good things fire makes possible. Look at what happens if it's done irresponsibly. So we're going to outlaw fire. Well, this is the kind of thinking the left engages in, and it's what they have done in creating and establishing this so-called nation of Belgium. So over time, what do they destroy nationalism with? The left. How do they attack nationalism? We're under attack here. You know, when you hear attacks on nationalism or populism, it's trying to make a bugaboo out of people who put their own country first. That's braggadocio, that's xenophobia, that's racism, you're not supposed to put your own country first. That's selfish. We're supposed to be citizens of the world, don't you understand? And we're no better and no different than anybody else, and that's Obamaism. So the concept of Europe and the closely related system of socialism there to undermine cultural and economic connections to one's own nation. So you have, in Europe now, you have a continent of people who've been taught not to believe in anything and not to be attached to their nations. They've done that with open borders, wanton immigration with no assimilation. The attack on nationalism has not just been here, it's all over Europe, and they've swallowed it. They embraced it. They thought it was great multiculturalism. They thought they were saying that they were great people, that they were non-discriminatory, they were open to one and all, and they literally allowed their own identities to be dissolved. And now they're in the process of being swallowed, overrun, and taken over. You have a continent of people who have been taught not to believe in anything, not to be attached to their own nations, and because something always beats nothing, they're being overrun by a bunch of 7th century zealots, militant Islamists, and they've let it happen. Belgium, a classic illustration and example of how. Get into details in a moment after we take another obscene profit timeout. Lots of other stuff coming up today, too, but this is crucial because, folks, it's happening here. Whether it is a job that could be completed here as it has been in Europe, too close to call, but it's really, really frightening. And I don't think enough people see it for what it is and the way it is. So we'll make an effort and stab at it when we get back.
Doing the work that the mainstream American media just won't do. Rush on the EIB network.
Well, I just got an email from a friend who said that what I'm doing is a lost cause because you are incapable of understanding my point. A friend of mine just said, practically verbatim in his email, you are attempting to explain fire to fish. Meaning, if you all are fish, fire isn't possible in your environment. And here I am trying to explain it. So is this too esoteric? Are you incapable of understanding my point here of how, in fact, militant Islamist combined with the left and its attempted destruction of our culture is making us a sitting duck? Let me give it a shot. Let me keep, because I think even you may be fish, but if there's anybody that could explain fire to fish, it's me. And they're all nodding their heads in agreement in there. Brussels is what happens when liberals do not push immigrants to integrate. But again, that's just half the problem. The other half of the problem is that liberals are destroying cultures, native, distinct, honorable national cultures everywhere under the name of multiculturalism. I mean, there's nothing to assimilate to. On Tuesday, when Islamist suicide bombers blew themselves up in Brussels, the European Union's foreign policy representative, the Italian Federica Mogherini, happened to be on an official visit to Jordan. Fighting back tears, she cut short a news conference saying, "It's a very sad day for Europe, what happened here in Belgium. Europe and its capital are suffering the same pain the Middle East has known and knows every single day, be it Syria, be it elsewhere." Brussels, by the way, is the capital, European Union. That's why it's the future utopia for a lot of people. She then mused about the role that Islam may have played in the tragedy, dismissing the idea of a clash between Islam and the West. Islam, said Federica Mogherini, Islam holds a place in our Western societies. Islam belongs to Europe. I'm not afraid to say that political Islam should be part of the picture. Hey, why don't you just sign the death warrant, Miss Mogherini? Because she's classic. She illustrates the problem. She refuses to see it for what it is. It's as justified as the Social Democrats, as the Tories, the Whigs. It doesn't matter. They're as justified as anybody else. Islam holds a place in our Western societies. Islam is a religion, for crying out loud, guided by an ideology. Her statement offers an insight into the mentality that has helped produce the situation in Western European societies where fear is woven into the fabric of daily life. It's a world of illusions and false identities. In Mogherini's world, the sufferings of Syrians caused by a savage regime is on the same par as the sufferings of inhabitants of European capital cities like Madrid, London, Paris, and now Brussels that have come under attack from jihadists who kill at random. In that world, political Islam, far from being an adversary dedicated to your destruction, becomes part of the family. That's exactly what they've done. But Ms. Mogherini fails to see the logical conclusion of her analysis, which is this. If Islam is no longer religion, if Islam is just another political party, then why shouldn't it be subjected to the same treatment, including criticism, as any other political party or ideology? And if it poses a present and clear danger, face outright suppression. In other words, they want it both ways. One day it's a religion, and you can't touch it. It's the religion of peace. The next day it's a legitimate political party, except we can't criticize it because that would be racist or bigoted or what have you. So what happened in Brussels was a co-production by two sick ideologies. The first one is Islamism in its many versions. And whatever version you talk about could be Khomeiniism, Talibanism, Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. It will remain firmly in place until it implodes under the weight of its own contradictions, like the Soviet Union did, or until it's defeated in a war, as was the case with Nazi Germany and imperialist Japan. But the other producer, the other co-producer in this disaster, the mushy and politically correct liberal ideology that has seduced segments of opinion in Western democracies, it can and must be combated by all those who wish to protect the democrat system in an increasingly dangerous world. It started in the 60s in Brussels when the post-war boom created a shortage of workers. There are 3 different languages spoken in Belgium. They were put together on a map. Lines were drawn, buffer between Germany and France. And the French-speaking Walloons decided they didn't have enough workers to compete with the other two. Germany is another language that's spoken. So they began to allow immigration from all parts of the Middle East, much as Angela Merkel said at the beginning of this current phase, opening the border to anybody from Syria, anywhere in the Middle East, opening to let them come in because there's a shortage of workers. The birth rate replacement level is below normal. They need an expanding labor force, and Germany is not producing enough people to fill it, so open the borders. She's paying the price for it now, but that's what happened in Belgium way back when, and who flooded the zone, so to speak. And they have been given political credibility. Meanwhile, liberalism, socialism, the European Western social democratic model is doing the same thing the left is doing in this country, attacking the fundamental nationality and culture of each individual country, trying to erase it and replace it with whatever they dream their utopia to be. So there's nothing to assimilate to. So borders are open to one and all to come in and be who they were rather than assimilate. And it's by country. Be it Belgium, be it the United Kingdom, be it Denmark, take your pick. Be it the United States. It's underway here too. So there you go, fish. I just tried to tell you about fire. Like the
unfiltered and unstoppable Rush on the EIB network.
And by the way, Tony Blair, who is the Barack Obama of the United Kingdom, he's a bit more likable guy, but Tony Blair, the Obama of the UK. Tony Blair says Brussels, the terror attacks in Brussels, follows from flabby liberalism that can't prevent terrorism, can't stop it. And little does he know how right he is. He's actually agreeing and affirming what Amir Tahari has written in the New York Post. He says it in different ways. The point is, it's not an isolated view. By the way, fish have seen blowtorches. Oil rigs, they know what fire is. Many of you in this audience think that we are losing America, that we are losing the country. Many people outside this audience think the same thing. Those of you who believe that have specific reasons for it. It's not quackery, it's not conspiracy theory related, and it's legitimate, careful analysis. And I want to explain to you how Europe is losing itself. I will close the sentence here. I want to dot the I's and cross the T's on this and wrap this up, so that you are able to put all this together, because for everything happening in Europe, there's the United States counterpart. The same thing is happening here. They're years ahead of us, but the same things that happened there and are happening here are have been happening for a while. They're intensifying here. Even domestic militant Islamic terror, which outside of 9/11, Fort Hood. See, when you think of it's just a couple instances, you start thinking it's more and more. But I want to go back first to this website, thereligionofpeace.com, which has a quite sensible and unique way of categorizing all the terror activity around the world in ways that the drive-by media do not report. Something as simple as body counts, numbers of incidents, where they happened, the type of incident, what kind of terror attack was it, in list form. You don't have to read 750, 1,500, 2,000 words to get this. It's just bam, bam, bam right there. Here I told you the numbers for the last 30 days worldwide. Last 30 days, 3,221 people injured, 1,165 people killed worldwide. Just in the last 30 days. I want to give you the number for last year. 27,596 people were killed last year to Islamic terrorism. By Islamic terrorism around the world. Do you know how many people Ebola killed? Well, it's about 10,000 in that. If you go to the certain parts of Africa. In 2015, there were 2,860 Islamic attacks in 53 countries. 27,596 people were killed. Another 26,000 were injured in just 2015. How many of you, do those numbers surprise you? Now, you might say, nah, it doesn't surprise me. Russia and other stuff's all over. But you haven't heard news accounts that would lead you to add that number or to get to that number by thinking of all the reports you've heard. You can think of 5 or 6 major terror attacks that you heard about. 14 people killed here, 136 in Paris. But you haven't heard anywhere near enough news to lead you to believe that almost 28,000 people were killed by militant Islamic terrorism just last year. And the reason for this is multifaceted. There are many reasons. But Europe is making it easy by importing them. Now, I want to go back to this woman, Federica Mogherini, who is the European Union foreign policy representative. Think of her as Hillary Clinton at the State Department. And my point is that Federica Mogherini has many United States counterparts. Many people think exactly as she does. John Kerry thinks like she does. Obama thinks like she does. Hillary Clinton thinks like she does. Joe Biden thinks like she does. Take your pick. Any prominent liberal Democrat thinks exactly like Federica Mogherini. And what, again, does she believe? She said Islam holds a place in our Western societies. Islam belongs to Europe. I'm not afraid to say that political Islam should be part of the picture. She admits to looking at Islam as both a religion and a political party. Its ideology makes it a political party. Her mentality is what shapes and produces the situation in Western European societies. So what's happening in Brussels is no different than what's going on in Syria or Madrid or London or Paris. She draws no distinctions whatsoever. Now, what's interesting about her and her counterparts here in the United States is how absolutely blind, naive, and ignorant, and that's in the best case scenario she is. The Muslim Brotherhood has a guy named Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, who is talked about in this column. And Sheikh Qaradawi has openly declared that Islam will conquer Europe and America. He's written about it. You can go read it today if you want. And he illustrates how they're going to do it. Today, he claims they're going to be able to do it peacefully by an aggressive version of proselytism, which is where you pressure the home country to adopt your beliefs, in this case, Sharia. You just constantly pressure. You do it using the host country's own political system. You insist on fair treatment, equality. You come in as a multicultural advocate, and you demand acceptance for what you believe under the existing laws of the country you're attempting to overtake. Depends on what country. In some countries, the Brotherhood promises and encourages suicide, terrorism, violence, and war. But in places like Europe, that we don't need to do that. Any terror attack is an added bonus. We're going to win by persuading them that we're just as legitimate as they are. And with Federica Mogherini, they've succeeded. And it looks like they've succeeded with Obama and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. They're just as legitimate a political party as anybody else. They're just as legitimate a religion. And have you heard Islam? It's nothing to do with terrorism. Islam's the religion of peace. So you combine all that, and here you have the Muslim Brotherhood guy, Sheikh Qaradawi, actually writing and explaining how they're doing it in Europe and how they're going to not stop there and how they're going to keep coming. The political goal is the conquest of Europe. They're open about it. Federica Mogherini could read it. just as I have found it here. You can read it. It's been published on websites as news stories. So the question, why would you want to give a seat at your political table to people whose political goal is to end everything you supposedly believe in so that they can then rule by Sharia or Islamic law? Do not misunderstand. This is exactly what the objective is. And we're seeing it play out in Europe, and we see the reaction to it in Brussels and elsewhere in Europe. We see how they cave to it and have been caving. And all of these people caving have people just like them here in the United States. But it's all made possible by liberalism, folks. This is the bottom line here, and the real thrust and the point that I'm trying to make is that multiculturalism and liberalism is on the march in this country to destroy or transform what has always been this distinct American culture, and it contains many aspects. I mean, you would look at hard work paying off, limited government, any number of things are being thrown upside down or disbanded and gotten away with and done away with. And so there's no way, if these people succeed, there will not be an American culture to assimilate into. And it's all happening under the guise of fairness. It's all happening under the guise of equality and so forth. It makes no sense. It makes no sense why anybody would passively sit by and let this happen. It's been my question about liberalism for as long as I've been alive. And the answers are scary. They're either really stupid and naive and can't see what is right in front of their faces, or they share the belief that the United States is an immoral, unjust place and has been from the beginning and deserves this kind of overthrow, redefinition, transformation, whatever you want to call it. And I rather think it's the latter, because I don't think they're so naive and ignorant they can't see this. They see it, and they're just not bothered by it. Quick timeout. Back with more after this.
The center of the radio universe. Rush on the EIB network.
And one of the things I say frequently on this program, if you listen here regularly, you're on the cutting edge of societal evolution. What's going to happen? I don't know how long it's going to take, a week, a month, a couple of months, but there's going to be something happen. And what I just spent the first 45 minutes of this program talking about is going to become big news. And you're going to see, I've heard that. I said, oh, yeah, Rush talked about that. It's the way this stuff always happens. You mean, what is this? I mean, the Republican campaign's going on. He's talking about terrorism because the objective here is to inform and get as many people up to speed on liberalism as the most destructive force in this country and world and what it's doing. And we have a way of seeing our own future by watching Europe. It's up to us whether we're going to go the same way or not. But I just want to tell you, Snerdley just said to me, okay, you gave two possibilities for why people like Federica Mogherini in the European Union can look at Islam as an equal, co-equal political party and feel unthreatened by it. You say that's either naive or purposeful. How can it? Because who's the common enemy? What is the biggest enemy of liberalism, folks? Honestly now, ask yourself, who do liberals consider to be their greatest threat? It's us. Conservatives. Republicans in some cases. It's not Islam. It's not terrorism. They think they can deal with that. Obama can make deals with Iran. He can make deals with the Ayatollah Khamenei. He can make deals with Hamas. He can make deals with Hezbollah. He's got to throw Israel overboard to do it, but so what? Now go to Islam. Militant Islam. Who are their biggest enemies? Christians. Conservatives. Right-wingers. The left, which is Islam. Militant Islam is on the left. Just as a Democrat Party is, take a look at their common political opponents or other kinds of, and it's us, folks. This is the thing that a lot of people can't get to their heads. And we had 9/11, we had Fort Hood. Do you have Obama will not condemn it. Nobody in the Obama administration will condemn, will not even utter the words militant Islamic terrorism. It will not be condemned. We will be. They'll go to the end of the earth to warn everybody about us or whoever our political presidential nominee happens to be, or whoever our Speaker of the House happens to be, or whoever our popular media figures are. The worst reprobates in the world, if you listen to these people. Far worse things are said about me than Obama and his people ever say about Islamic terrorism. And ditto Islamic terrorism and militant Islamists. You look at the common enemies. For some reason, Obama and his crew do not look at Islam as a threat to their power, as terrorism is a threat to their power, but they see that in us. We are a threat to their power. And we are. We're trying to take it away from them. We're trying to beat them in elections. That is not allowed. That will not happen. That we pose too big a threat to them. But they can peacefully coexist with all these other people. They're on the same place in the political prism. They're both out there on the left. Both have the same common enemy. United States, great Satan. Here in America, the left thinks we're unjust and immoral from the days of our founding. Militant Islamists think we're immoral and unjust because we're infidels. Remember, I've told you, you listen to the ex-president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, couldn't tell the difference of what he says about America than Joe Biden on the campaign trail, or Obama. They talk about this country in identical ways. They talk about Republicans in identical ways. We are their biggest threat, making us their central enemy. The American left, Democrat Party, and liberalism worldwide. Its enemy is conservatism, because conservatism, if ever it succeeded, really succeeded, would vastly shrink the source of power, wealth, and existence for all these people, and that is government. Okay, to the phones we go. People patiently waiting. We are going to start in Iowa. This is Jeremy. Jeremy, great to have you on the program. What is the name of the place you're calling from?
Postville is actually, I live out in the country.
Okay, but
Postville.
Well, it looks like Decorah, but I don't know how to pronounce it.
That's just a big town where I live by, but it's
all right.
Postville.
So you're in Iowa. Okay.
Yep, Iowa. No, I was just wanted to tell you I'm a long time caller long time listener, second time caller. I'm kind of nervous, so bear with me. But I've been listening to you as long as I can remember. My earliest memories are listening to you. And actually, a couple weeks ago, I had to shut you off because I just felt like you're becoming more of a mouthpiece for Trump than anything. And
nobody. No, wait a minute. Nobody shuts me off. You might have.
I just turned you on today, Russ. More out of habit
you're back.
That's
my
anything.
Point. You're back. But why did you turn it off?
Because I was just getting disgusted about everything. It was about Trump. In the day I heard that article you shared about that lady saying the reason you supported her was because he had a house down there. And I've been thinking that all summer about, I figured it wasn't because he was conservative, because you knew him, you golfed with him, and I could understand it. I was thinking, well, maybe if I had somebody that I was friends with that I didn't agree with politically, but I knew I might support them over somebody else because maybe I'd have more of an influence over them. But
okay, hang on here just a second, Jeremy. Folks, if you're just joining it, he's referring to a soundbite I played about an hour ago, in fact. It was Melinda Hanneberger, who is the editor-in-chief at Roll Call. And she was interviewed, I think, on CNN, and she said that she thinks that I support Trump because we both have houses in Palm Beach. And you're telling me you actually, that resonated with you? You thought because you thought the same
you were all
thing?
On board, yep. And I was like, well, I've heard him say that he knows him for a while and he golfs with him, and he's probably a nice guy. But and I was thinking that'd probably influence the guy a lot. So I could resonate.
I
with
can't
that a lot.
believe how little you think of me and how shallow you think I am.
Well, I could understand it myself. I was just trying to picture myself if I knew somebody who I was friends with. I might not agree with them, but they run for office. The other
you
guy
know what you're getting confused at? When you think you hear me describing Trump when I'm actually trying to explain why Trump supporters support him, because I'm constantly hit with people who can't figure it out. And I think for a certain type of Trump supporter, it makes perfect sense. And I've gone to great lengths to try to explain to people who I think need to hear it, by the way, why people are supporting him. But I've never said that I am.
I know.
You're inferring
I felt
it
that way, yes.
But I can tell you this. I certainly, I used to live in New York, too, and I never voted Democrat, and that's all that lived there. And I knew Trump there, too. And I knew Chuck Schumer. I mean, a lot of these people, I haven't supported them.
Okay.
That's other people. You want to hear some other theories like this? I know why you support Trump. You know why, Rush? Because Trump's you. You were Trump before Trump was. Yeah, Rush, and when you first started, you were just as irreverent. You're doing just like Trump. And when you look at Trump, you're kind of flattered because you see somebody getting away with what the press wouldn't let you get away with, and you see somebody who's doing what you did. You feel. I've heard that. I have heard the seduced you playing golf. I know what happened. You went out, you played golf, and he loved you. He told you how great you were, and it's all it took, right? I've heard every one of these theories. I have not heard the theory that we both have houses in Palm Beach. I'd not heard that theory. But Jeremy, I'm glad. I take it all in. I digest it. I process it. I'm glad you called. I appreciate it. But I want to assure you, I'm not that shallow. It was just last Friday that I was taking heat on this program for being pro-Cruz. How many Trump callers did we have raking me over the coals Friday? 2 or 3 callers. I can't believe you're selling out Trump. You're so into Cruz, and Cruz, you're not going to win. I heard it all over the place. And now today, I'm getting it. You're so into Trump. I know why you're into Trump. I thought, because you live in the same place. I thought that. Okay. By the way, may as well get this out of the way. I mentioned this last week. I'm going to mention it again. Back in January, Donald Trump warned everybody about what was happening in Europe, and he specified Belgium in terms of out-of-control, militant Islamic supremacism. He was going on, and the New York Times did a story mocking him, laughing at him, making fun of him, saying he didn't know what he was talking about. This is classic, a guy running for president who has no foreign policy knowledge whatsoever, just rattling off a bunch of stuff, trying to sound smart when he doesn't know anything. And who's laughing now? Even James Taranto. We admire James Taranto terrifically. Here he's best of the web today, the Wall Street Journal, their blog. And he was one of the people way back when, kind of laughing and joking about Trump, warning everybody about out-of-control Islam in Europe. And particularly, Trump cited Belgium. Taranto is not a Trump fan, but he did relate the truth of something Trump said, as reported with scorn by the New York Times. Asked by the Fox Business Network anchor Maria Bartiromo about the feasibility of his proposal to bar foreign Muslims from entering the country, Trump argued that Belgium and France had been blighted by the failure of Muslims in these countries to integrate, to assimilate. Trump said there's something going on, Maria. Go to Brussels, go to Paris, go to different places. There's something going on and it's not good, where they want Sharia law, where they want this, they want that. There has to be some assimilation. There isn't any. There is something bad going on. And he started warming up to his theme. He added that Brussels was in a particularly dire state. He said, you go to Brussels. I was in Brussels a long time ago, 20 years ago. So beautiful. Everything's so beautiful, like living in a hellhole right now. And it is. Because one of the things they've done throughout Europe, but Belgium especially, they've allowed all kinds of Muslims to immigrate, but they have segregated them into their own areas, like France has done outside Paris. There are separate enclaves where various immigration or immigrants live, and some of them are so dangerous that cops won't even go there. They've just seeded the areas. in effect, they're ghettos. And that's one difference here. That has not happened here. They're not required to live among each other in less than normal conditions. But that's what Belgium has done, because they basically imported these people for labor and the multicultural reasons as well. And he said the same thing about Paris. He said, Paris is not this romantic, beautiful place you think it is. It's not what it was 20 years ago. And the New York Times headline, Donald Trump finds new city to insult Brussels. This is back in January. So I'm not, I mention this to you because it's news. It happens to be the truth. And I'm going to tell you this. Like I just said, in a month, maybe 2 weeks, 2 months, something's going to happen. And everything I talked about, where did I hear that? That's right. Rush. Oh, Rush brought this up way back at the end of March. That's what being on the cutting edge means, listening to this program. Back to the phones. Aaron in Louisville. Great to have you on the program. Hi.
Hi, Rush. You said that just right. It is Louisville. And I'm triple mega dittos, been listening to you since the early 90s. And I'm a little insulted. And I'm a lot insulted, actually. And I just wanted you to tell your friend, please, whoever your friend he or she is. And actually, since you let me on, you and Mr. Snerdley, I will tell your friend, do not insult this audience in that we don't understand what's going on. Now, I do appreciate you, Russ, giving it, and it helps to have your voice, giving that a voice and simplifying and clarifying what we know what's going on. That the left is dismantling our identity. And really, do Muslims have to forsake their identity at all? No, not one bit. I don't see anyone saying the burqas are outdated and the hijabs need to go. But we do know what's going on.
Well, I appreciate what she's talking. I got an email from a friend about an hour ago, in fact, who said my addressing the subject here of immigration, assimilation, and liberal destruction of cultures in Belgium was like me trying to explain fire to fish, meaning this audience, fish, don't know what fire is, and your audience have no clue. And he was trying to be helpful. You're engaged in a lost cause. So, by the way, he's an elected official, I should tell you. It is a he, and he is an elected official. What does that tell you, Aaron?
He must not know your audience because, and I'm sure that there are some low information conservatives out there, but it's not this audience. So I think he needs or she needs to call you back and apologize to us.
I didn't take it personally, and I think he was just trying to say, look, it's a nice effort, but this is not why people listen to you. Here's the thing. No, here's the thing about that. Every day, almost, it's not every day, almost every day, I look at what I have here. And I ask myself, something like I really care about this Belgium, all of this, because it comes under the umbrella of liberalism and what it is destroying. And we, the United States, are in the process of being destroyed by I firmly believe it, and I'm trying to alert as many people as possible to it as I have my whole career. So I have a story like this that I'm really passionate about. And I ask myself, can I make anybody care about this? I mean, they're listening to the radio not to be bored. Is this going to be too esoteric? I ask myself that all the time. And you know what I always do? Just like you, I always come down on the side of the audience wants to hear it. It's up to me to make it interesting, and if I think I can, then I'll do it. Because I think you're totally capable of getting it.
Yeah, I do. I think you should talk more about it. I don't know why anyone feels like the United States has to be like Europe. I don't know why anyone feels like we need to be that. We're in a totally different place in the world, and geographically, and there's no reason why we should be open and porous and I just don't know why.
Well, it is an interesting. What is it about Europe that the left so romanticizes? It's some things. It's trains. They think trains are just the coolest thing. They're sophisticated. They're not polluting. There's no individuals driving trains. You've got everybody grouped. and everybody's on a train and they're controllable, and you control density, you control transportation. It's cleaner, it's far more sophisticated. I think dreamy-eyed leftists in this country basically have a negative view of this country because of all of the freedom and what that has meant in terms of real diversity. Liberal diversity is skin color. To you and me, diversity is the differences in individuals, what interests them, what motivates them, what they choose to do, how much they put into it. They look at diversity as skin color, sexual orientation, gender, or what have you. They look at Europe and they romanticize that that's closer to their utopia than anything here is. And it's probably a multifaceted answer as to what it is that's attractive to them. But there's no question they do think Europe is far more sophisticated. They don't spend much on defense. They don't really waste a lot of money. Great welfare states. I guess they think they're predicated on equality and sameness and all these wonderful, impossible outcomes. But it's probably more hideous than that. But you're absolutely right. There's a fascination with it.
Right.
And we run rings around Europe. But why should we sit here and allow ourselves to be subordinated and reduced? I mean, Europe, even you combine all those countries in the European Union and you don't have a superpower. And individually, you're nowhere near as they can't even defend themselves anymore. But for some reason, they're considered more enlightened, more sophisticated, wiser. I actually think that part of it, and you can see it in the way the European Union is constructed, the way it's built. I'm talking about the governmental organization, the actual governing body, the European Union, not the nation states, but I think there is a fascination on the left with aristocracy. The upper classes, the all-knowing, the betters, the superiors, running everything, because the peasants and the serfs, not smart enough, not wise enough, not educated enough, nowhere near sophisticated, and never will be, and therefore we can't leave anything of importance up to them. And if you look, you can see it. Hollywood every now and then will make movies or TV shows about the British aristocracy, and it's always in an admiring, longing way. I really think it has to do, in part, with this belief in a superior class system made up of elites, and you are elite by birth, you are elite by training, you are elite by education, therefore they control. You are elite by wealth, but new wealth is not automatically entered. New wealth is frowned upon because it was derived via work. You know, it wasn't that long ago, I'm talking about 80 years, it wasn't that long ago that in Great Britain, golf professionals were not permitted to play at membership country clubs. You know why? Working class. They were beneath. The best in the game were not permitted to play because they were working class. And I think if you listen to liberals and the way they talk about, they use socialist terms to describe people, the workers. I have always resented government referring and politicians referring to the people who make this country as workers. I'll never forget Fidel Castro. You remember when Elian Gonzalez was sent back to Cuba, and Castro sent his father here to make a big tear-jerking appeal to get his son back. His kid's mother had died escaping Cuba, drowned in the Atlantic on the way, and they made a big deal about getting Elian. And Fidel said I think his name was Miguel Gonzalez, but whatever the father's name was, Fidel said, he's a good worker. He does wonderful, great work, and he's a good work for the regime or whatever. But this term worker is it's demeaning. It's It categorizes people in a class sense. That's why I resent the use of the word. But I believe that their fascination with Europe is rooted in aristocracy and their secret belief and desire that they are or can be or want to be aristocrats in the age-old sense of the word. Back after this.
The courage to fight and the talent to succeed. Rush on the EIB network.
You know, communism and Marxism, they're really about class warfare, and it's almost a love-hate relationship. Communism and socialism are rooted in the resentment of the upper classes, the aristocracy. And yet, it's only a certain kind of upper class that they don't like. But if you look at the American left today, it's almost like they idolize European aristocrats and want to consider themselves part of that club in a sense. But you know how 5-year-old kids look at Disney World, Disneyland. This is make-believe place. And it's just however a kid looks at Disneyland, make believe, it's whatever you want it to be. It's just so much fun. You got fairies and you got dancing mice. You've got great rides. It's just total fantasy. You never worry about what it costs. You're 5, you're 10. You couldn't care. That's how leftists look at Europe. It's a fantasy land, and they're able to make it whatever they want it to be. And they tell themselves Europe is filled with superior people and far more sophistication and intelligence and what have you. And here it is a resentment of the lower classes that's driving America. It's it's both. I mean, no question that this anti-establishment mentality in the pub, which is huge, is, anti-political class and so forth. But at the same time, those people, the political elites in this country, actually look down their noses at the people that vote for them in many ways. So it goes both ways. Anyway, here's Maureen in Omaha. Maureen, I'm glad you called. You're next on the Rush Limbaugh program. Hi.
Hi, Rush. I'm calling in regards to the topic of assimilation that you've been discussing.
Yes.
I was a Peace Corps volunteer who was sent to the Middle East for 2 years. I lived in the Sultanate of Oman, which is next to Yemen in Saudi Arabia. However, before our group of Peace Corps volunteers could begin our working in the host country for 2 years, we had to have 3 months of intensive Arabic language studies daily, and also cultural studies, like how not to offend the people in the Middle East that we would be working at, certain things like that. And it just strikes me as odd that, here's an American Peace Corps volunteer agency that requires that of all Peace Corps volunteers. I'm sure it's the same today.
Well, sure it is, but I get your point. But you were guests. You were not immigrating to live there and hatch a takeover, as immigrants in this country are dreaming. I mean, immigrants are immigrants. You were visiting, and I understand it would not have been proper for Peace Corps volunteers to go to, say, Oman and say, you are going to learn our language or we're not coming. They would have said, stay away. We don't want you anyway. It's just an idea. JFK's making himself look good. Stay away. But you did great work in the Peace Corps, and your point about assimilating is exactly right. It's based in respect. It's based in tradition and so forth, and good manners. But none of that's applicable here. We're talking about...
He makes it look easy, but it's not. Rush on the EIB network.
Why aren't there all kinds of people saying I sound like I'm in the tank for Kasich? I mean, I got people all over saying I'm in the tank for Cruz and they're never listening, or I'm in the tank for Trump, they're never going to listen again. But nobody's out there saying that I'm in the tank for Kasich. I can't find it. I can't find one place where people think that I'm in the tank for Kasich. But it's amazing depending on where you look on Twitter. Some people are never listening to me again because I'm so in the tank for Trump and they don't understand it. And over there, about the same number of people, I don't know what's happened to Russia. I can't listen. He just abandoned Trump and now he's for Cruz. Meanwhile, I've not officially stated a preference, but one thing we can't find is anybody who thinks that I've sold out for Kasich. Anyway, folks, I don't think we can find anybody else who has either. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. El Rushmo, Serving Humanity. Okay, now I want to go to the audio sound bites here. The first hour of the program was devoted to a discussion of what happened in Belgium and why it's happening all over Europe. Just uncontrolled immigration of militant Islamists and terrorists combined with multiculturalism in all of these countries, which is destroying the native cultures of all of these European nations, which is done purposefully. Left-wing multiculturalism is aimed at destroying the culture of the host country it seeks to either conquer, overthrow, damage, or what have you. And it's happening here, folks. We've got a robust multicultural movement here, which is doing its best to discredit everything American it can. From the founding, even before that, to the discovery of this country, it tries to discredit. You know it as well as I do if you've got kids in school. So here we go to audio soundbite number 4 on the roster today. This happened on CNN this morning. Carol Costello speaking with the director of the George Washington University program on extremism. So we have an American college professor here. Actually, it's a think tank, I guess. The George Washington University program on extremism. And who do you think the extremists are, by the way? Take a wild guess who the extremists this guy is warning students about. And I'll guarantee you it's not militant Islamists. And I'll guarantee you it's not communists. And I'll guarantee you it's not dictators. And I'll guarantee you it's not totalitarians. No way. This guy, the extremism this guy is warning everybody of is right-wing hooligans. His name is Lorenzo Vadino. And CNN was asking him today about anti-immigrant protests in Brussels. And her question was this. Let's just talk first about what happened in Brussels with those right-wing protesters. Those protesters blamed the immigrants coming into Europe. Do you believe that they were just hit by a massive terror attack brought to you by ISIS, militant Islamists, at the capital of the European Union? We know the death toll. 26 people injured are still in the hospital. And these people want to focus on right-wing protests against it as somehow the problem? This is exactly why I spent the first hour of the program on this, and even some into the second hour. So her question, let's just talk first about what happened in Brussels with these right-wing... No, we're through talking about the terror event, I guess. Yeah, now we're going to move on to what was really important, the aftermath, the protests by anti-immigrant right-wingers. She says those protesters blame the immigrants coming into Europe. Is it right for them to place blame on the immigrants?
No, I mean, obviously, we're talking about a fringe group of people. These are soccer hooligans. As in most European countries, the soccer hooliganism scene is dominated by small right-wing groups. And these are people who create havoc every weekend in the stadiums. And obviously, they took advantage of the situation in Belgium as there were, in a way, gatherings which are very peaceful and sending a positive message. They hijacked what was happening over the weekend in Brussels and to make their political point.
You believe this? They hijacked a political event. They hijacked what happened. He won't even call it what it is. He won't say they hijacked the terror attack in Brussels to make their political point. And here you have very aristocratic-sounding European running a think tank at George Washington University on extremism. And obviously, we're talking about a fringe group of people, the soccer hooligans. As in most European countries, the soccer hooliganism scene is dominated by right-wing groups. And these are people who create havoc every weekend in the stadiums. We're not even talking about the Islamic terrorists. You see here, folks, you see who their real enemy is? I'm sorry for getting exercised about this, but this is exactly the kind of thing I feel it necessary to warn everybody about, because this is dangerously outrageous. What are we supposed to do after a terror attack? Just passively sit by and either not mention it or apologize, maybe even? Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe we should apologize and then ask Lorenzo Vadino to chair a seminar on why they hate us. And that would give ISIS and the Islamic terrorists a chance to say that they don't like these soccer hooligans. And the reason they blew up the European Union and the train station and the airport is because they're fed up with right-wingers at soccer games. And by this, we can reach a new level of mutual understanding and common ground with the... I mean, it's terribly, terribly wrong to blame the terrorists here, the immigrants. Terribly, terribly, terribly wrong to hijack unfortunate event there to make your political point. These people are going to be the death of Western civilization. They are going to be responsible for the death of Western civilization because they are willing to excuse terrorism in order to make their political point. This guy's obviously a flaming leftist, and in order to make his political point, he tolerates terrorism and then blames the fact that it happened on soccer hooligans. Well, that's the natural extension. If you're going to sit here and blame a post-terror attack anti-immigrant protest in this country, aren't the protesters, leftist protesters, aren't they idolized practically? Aren't they treated as heroes? Whenever, I mean, they can be as militant as they want, and they can be as destructive as they want. Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter. They can tear up, they can destroy, they can wreak havoc, they can destroy private property, they can injure people, and they're heroes because they're advancing leftist causes. But you let people opposed to an out-of-control immigration policy, letting in essentially militant Islamic terrorists who then engage in militant Islamic terrorism, and somehow it's the fault of the right wing. Do not doubt me, folks, when I say we, conservatism, however that's defined in your limited government, low taxes, individual liberty, individual freedom, high standards of expectation, however you define it, we are the threat. We must be blamed for all the bad behavior in the world because we are so intolerant, don't you see? Yes, we're so intolerant. We're just not willing to let militant Islamic terrorists move into our countries and blow up things and kill people. And until we reach our enlightened state where we must let that happen because we understand why, we will always be considered the responsible parties. And that is exactly how they think. So I want you to listen to this again, keeping in mind everything I informed you about concerning what happened in Brussels and how. It's a combination of two things: uncontrolled immigration combined with multiculturalism, which is destroying the dominant native culture of all of these countries so that there is nothing to assimilate to. Immigrants can take over a country and make it their own, or the pockets of it that they live in and control, because leftists, liberals, in the name of whatever, equality, fairness, whatever the hell they talk about, they sit by and let that happen because it's inferior or it's xenophobic or, native culture nationalism is racism, is bigotry or whatever. So you listen to this guy again, this exalted, obviously so impressed with himself. highly educated, very sophisticated European professor at George Washington University tell us who's really to blame and what's really bad that's going on in Belgium.
No, I mean, obviously, we're talking about a fringe group of people. These are soccer hooligans. As in most European countries, the soccer hooliganism scene is dominated by small right-wing groups. And these are people who create havoc every weekend in the stadiums. And obviously, they took advantage of the situation in Belgium as there were, in a way, gatherings which are very peaceful and sending a positive message. They hijacked what was happening over the weekend in Brussels and to make their political point.
Well, what happened was a terror attack with multiple deaths. People protested it. That speaks for itself. And by the way, there's something else in this. Here you have a European, obviously somebody who thinks he's an elite. You can tell it in the way he speaks. You can tell it in his inflections and his act. You can tell it, folks. It's dripping. This guy's an elitist. He's a very exclusive member of a rare club of people. And who are the real hooligans where he lives? Soccer fans, football fans, the working class, the people who actually go to these barbaric contests, these oversized stadia, to watch violence actually take place on the field and applaud it while guzzling their cheap lager. It's so beneath us. And then these hooligans, after getting their fill of soccer and being primed for violence, leave the stadia and create violent protests. It's despicable. It's beneath us. He hates these serfs. And that's what they are. And it's the same view from the top here, folks. Maybe bowling instead of soccer. Maybe NASCAR instead of soccer. Maybe football instead of, who knows, maybe a combination of all three, but it's the same thing here.
This election is not politics as usual, and only America's anchorman can explain it all. Don't miss one word of Rush Limbaugh's flawless election commentary with a membership to Rush 24/7. Listen or watch all 3 hours live or on demand. That's Rush 24/7 at rushlimbaugh.com. You're listening to the EIB Network.
A Washington Post story here by Sean Sullivan, and it was contributed to by a guy named Dave Weigel. Why some Republicans are feeling shame. What is this about, Snerdley? Is this Republican shame story is about embarrassment over both Trump and Cruz? Is that what it is? More. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Look, I want to repeat this again. I mentioned this late last week, and it was a holiday week for some. It was a big holiday. It seemed like everybody I know from New York was down here last week. It was just incredible. So a lot of people were on vacation. What's going on in the Republican primary? That number that you all know, 1,237. The New York Times had a story last week, 2 weeks ago now, that starting April 5th with the Wisconsin primary begins a 100-day plan by the party to deny both Trump and Cruz the nomination. Now, they say it's designed to stop Trump, but by extension, it's designed to stop Cruz. They don't want Cruz, and it's evident when you listen to them. The point that they are going to make, and these are the Rules Committee types, they are going to write rules and attempt to establish the following. If neither Trump nor Cruz get to 1,237, they will both be considered ineligible for the nomination, because since neither got to 1,237, that will effectively mean they have been rebuked by Republican voters. And the fact that neither candidate gets to 1,237 is going to be seen by the establishment, the people that run the RNC, as the opportunity they've long wanted to choose a nominee at the convention. And it will be maybe somebody who ran but got out early, or maybe it'll be somebody who didn't even run. Paul Ryan seems to be a popular name being bandied about in this scenario. Now, I know what you're saying. Wait a minute. If neither Trump nor Cruz get to 1237, why are they disqualified? Well, they're going to be said to be disqualified. Remember, they're going to try to establish the fact that both have been rejected by voters, since neither won the nomination by rule. And the rule says you need 37. Yeah, but Trump people. Yeah, but Trump got to like 1,150. Well, that's not 1237. Yeah, but 1,150, that's a lot of votes. You can't just... Yes, we can. He didn't get 1237, so he may as well have gotten 0. And the Trump people are going to have a cow. And the Cruz people are going to do the same thing. Wait a minute. Okay, so maybe neither candidate got to 1237, but we're both in the running. We can still be chosen. No, that's the point of doing a contested convention, is to deny these two frontrunners. The Republican Party, if they have their dream, don't want either of these two. And frankly, they don't want Cruz more than they want Trump, but they don't want either one. So I'm just warning you, brace yourself. That's what they're angling for. And so the effort's going to be deny Trump 1237 under the belief that no way Cruz can get there on it. He'd have to win 83% of the delegates left to get to 1237 on his own. Trump about 55%. And the whole strategy is to deny Trump. They don't want these two guys, folks. And that's how they're going to do it. That's how they're going to try to do it. Now, Pat Buchanan says if they do that, a bunch of these Trump voters are just going to vanish. You're never going to see them on Election Day. And the Republican Party can forget about them forever. But you know what? What's happening on the Democrat side, the same thing can happen. What's going on over there with crazy Bernie and Hillary. Hillary isn't winning anything, and she's piling up delegates. Bernie won 3 more states over the weekend, one of them important, state of Washington. By important, I mean big number of delegates. And nobody's talking about it, but you know, if Bernie keeps winning and they just give him the shaft and yank him the hell away, don't be surprised if a bunch of Democrat voters have the same reaction toward the Democrat Party that Trump voters will have toward the Republicans. The media wants you to believe that the Democrats are going to be firmly and fully united in electoral bliss with the nomination of Hillary Clinton. But that party is not unified behind her. She is not universally loved, adored, respected by any stretch. Bernie has gobs of anti-establishment fans in his camp. Now, let's add one thing to this. FBI, grand jury, evidence, Hillary's email server, trafficking in classified data. Will there be an indictment or not? What happens if there isn't? If there's a lot of evidence, it's going to get leaked, folks. If they don't indict, and the FBI has tons of evidence worthy of an indictment, somebody's going to leak it because somebody's going to be royally ticked off at the FBI. It will leak if there's no indictment. Now we're told the FBI wants to talk to Mrs. Clinton, wants to interview her. Some people are saying, well, that proves they've got nothing. And they're going to try to get her and catch her in a lie and charge her with that like they did Martha Stewart. And then it could be that Obama is waiting to see if her support begins to slip even a little bit. Maybe he will tell Lynch over at DOJ, okay, go ahead and indict her. I'll stand aside. Indictment comes. That's not guaranteed Mrs. Clinton gets out. But if that were to happen, here comes Biden, because they're not going to let crazy Bernie anywhere near this. It is the most listened to radio talk show in the country. There's a reason for that. And that reason is it is hosted by me. Here's Matt in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's great that you waited, sir. I appreciate your patience. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Rush? Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Yeah, I was calling because you had a guy that called in earlier basically blaming you because he thinks you support Trump. And that kind of ignorance in people.
Well, now, wait. He thinks I support Trump because we live in the same place.
Because you live in the same place, of all things. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It goes to show the misconception, I believe, that people have of Trump. Believe it or not, I'm not even a Trump supporter. I'm a Cruz supporter, but I would defend Trump in those regards.
If Trump's a nominee, will you vote for him?
Oh, absolutely. I would. Because I think that, I think that people believe that Trump is a liberal in conservative clothing. But in reality, I think he is a conservative in liberal clothing. And that is what draws so many people towards him. Because he resonates with people because of he, just like the Democratic side, they point out the injustices to all these little groups of people. And Donald Trump points out the injustices to us, the entire middle class.
You have a point. This reminds me of something. Good job here, Matt. You just reminded me of something I saw last night. I received in the email I think it was a YouTube link, whatever, it was a video, to a couple of guys who have an internet show. Two guys that stand or sit behind microphones and act like it's the McLaughlin Group. There's just two guys out there. I don't know who they are. They're just, I'm sure it's a couple guys in a podcast or whatever it is. They came across, apparently Trump had a meeting with the Washington Post editorial board. And the audio tape of this interview and a transcript of it was released. And the point that these two guys were trying to make was that Trump is a blithering idiot. That he is the most illiterate on policy person that's ever run for the office of president. He doesn't know anything. He's incompetent. He is embarrassingly uneducated on basic things that somebody running for president ought to know. And they give three examples from the Washington Post editorial board meeting that Trump had. And the first example they gave was, I think it was Fred Hyatt speaking. He is the editorial editor, I think, at the Washington Post. I think it was Hyatt. There were a bunch of, obviously, people in the meeting. Somebody asked Trump if he thinks that there is an institutional racist problem with policing in America. They didn't ask him about a specific incident or city or place. They asked him if he thought there was, and would he comment on community policing and whether or not it was racist, biased. I forget the exact wording of the question. The word racism might have not been in there, but the impression I got was that these people wanted to know if Trump thinks the cops are corrupt. That was essentially the question. And Trump wouldn't go there. What Trump talked about was high unemployment in the black community, black youth unemployment, and he was terribly troubled by it, and overall African-American community unemployment. And he said it's a bad situation and it's got to change. Not nearly enough attention's being paid to it. And these two guys that were hosting this show, look at him, he's so stupid, he's so dumb, he didn't even know what the question was about. He didn't even maybe know that there's a problem with policing in America. He didn't even go there. What a blithering idiot. What a fool. I've never seen anything like it. Why, the question was, are the cops corrupt or racist? And he probably doesn't even know anybody. And I watched this. And this was sent to me, by the way, by somebody who thought Trump probably looked bad in this. But I looked at this as a Trumpist would look at it. And I would think a Trumpist would see this as a trick question by the Washington Post that Trump cleverly didn't fall for. A Trumpist, a true Trump supporter, would see this as an attempt by the Washington Post editorial board to somehow entrap or ensnare Trump into saying something, one way or the other, about the cops, so that they can then start some controversy. Either Trump says cops are not racist, which would be ideal, because the Washington Post thinks, like every leftist, that the cops are racist, and they're putting people in jail, Hispanics and African Americans, who don't deserve to be in jail. This is what the left thinks. But Trump didn't answer that. But he also didn't defend the cops. He talked about unemployment. And these two guys hosting this little internet show, whatever it was, just were beside themselves with Trump's ignorance. And I watched this and I said, you know what? He's answering the problem. He's basically saying, we've got a crime problem because there are too many people with too much time on their hands. We need people working. There are all kinds of root causes for misbehavior in kids, in adults, criminal misbehavior. One of the root causes is too much time. And it was clear. He didn't say any of this that I'm saying. This is total interpretation, but it was clear that if you know how to listen to Trump, and then and in this answer, this really ticked these guys off. Trump, in answering the question about whether policing is racist or corrupt, started talking about fair trade and China and how where everybody's at a disadvantage because we're losing jobs. And I interpreted this as Trump sensing a red flag and going nowhere near it, not wanting to give the Washington Post editorial board anything other than he's stupid, ignorant, doesn't know what he's talking about. But his answer to the question was basically, in a lot of people's view, one of the solutions to the crime problem is get people back to work. And I don't know who really could argue with that. I mean, some people might. But if you were anti-Trump and you watch this, then you would conclude that Trump was evasive, didn't want to answer. You might think he doesn't even know what he's being asked, but he's not stupid by any stretch of the imagination. Well, there were two other examples of this. And by the way, don't anybody go try to find this, because I'm not going to air it. That's the point of this is not to call these guys out. And since I've already talked about it, look, this is just as good as hearing it. Trust me, that's, explaining things. I happen to be pretty good at that. So you don't need to hear it. I'm telling you what it was. There were two other, it was a 55-minute interview. And these two guys hosting the show cited three things that just embarrass them that Trump is. And these are guys, looked at their late 20s, early 30s, but they just thought Trump was a total embarrassment, total fool, doesn't know anything, and cannot answer these questions because he's not informed on it. He doesn't know. And I forget what the other two were, but they were along. NATO? No, I don't think it was NATO. It might have been terrorism in Brussels. I forget. I've got it here. It's in my internet, in my email inbox. So I can go back and look at it again. But anyway, my point is that a Trump supporter watching this would not be convinced that Trump's an idiot. They would think Trump's brilliant for not falling into the trap set by the enemy, the Washington Post. And Trump started out by telling, look, you know what? Oh, the second was libel law. Well, just what the hell are you going to do about libel? How in the world and he didn't say what he was going to do. He started talking about how he's been mistreated, how a lot of people are lied about in the press and they can't do anything about it, and how it's got to stop. The press is ruining people. He said, you people have written things about me utterly false. I can't tell you how many times. It's terrible. You're terrible what you've done. He's telling them this. And I'm telling you, your Trumpist supporter, yeah, man, you tell him. But the anti-Trumpist is going to look at this. What a blithering idiot. This guy doesn't even know enough to answer these questions. So it would be a good Rorschach test. Anyway, I'm up against it on time. Got to take a break. Back after this.
You're listening to Rush Limbaugh,
The soundtrack of your conservative life.
on the EIB network.
Carter in Manchester, New Hampshire. Great to have you on the program. Hi.
Hey, Rush, what an honor it is to speak with you. Been
Hey.
listening to you for about 5 years. I was sitting in the back of my dad's car from as long as I know, listening to you and hearing your voice, and just what an honor.
You're sitting in the back of the car.
Yes, well, since I was 6 years old, I've been listening to you in my dad's car.
I got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'm a millennial about to graduate at University of New Hampshire, and I've got roommates that are kind of the type of guys that just don't really go out of their way to, read and listen to people like you about politics, and they kind of go with the flow of, the crowd, and they only really see the drive-by liberal rhetoric that, conservatives are just white bigots. And I just wanted to know from advice from you, something, not one thing to say, but, how to approach people like that.
Here's the, you were asking the time-honored question of how do we convert people? How do we get them to open their minds? How do we get them to listen to something else? And for as many different questions, there are as many different suggestions, solutions, or what have you. What I have found is what doesn't work. You're not going to succeed by getting in their face and telling them they're wrong. You might have some, if you can take the time, if you actually talk to them, ask them a series of questions to which the answer is obvious that proves your point of view, and let the recollection or let the correct answer sort of permeate their minds on its own. And that can be fun to do. It's you're in a conversation with these guys and they're off on these tangents that right-wingers or bigots or racists. Well, let me ask you a question. And then you come up with a question that either recites some great work by conservative in charity organization, charity work, or what have you. The other thing you can do is challenge them and look, you guys got nothing to lose. And it's important to me, this is what you say, it's important to me that you guys be right. It's important to me, and you're young, you're just starting out, you're going to be leading this country someday. It's important to me that you guys ask, would you try listening to Limbaugh just a week? Don't have to tell anybody, just listen for a week. That's all I ask. Just do it for a week and then come back and talk to me.
Yeah. No, that's good advice.
Make it sound like it's really important to you that they do this because you care about them. That the fact that you care, that's 80% right there, because they think people like you don't care about anything. You really care about them, and ask them to do it for you, and then just trust the fact that if I have them here for a week, we'll own them.
You're listening to Rush Limbaugh,
The big voice on the right
on the EIB network.
The Clintons are warning crazy Bernie to change his tone. And a superdelegate for Hillary is deciding to go for Bernie because that's what the people in his district want. We will be back tomorrow in 21 hours, revved and ready to go. We'll see you then.